everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar as part of our Caregivers Connected series. We're very excited to bring this topic to you. Just real quick over our agenda, we're going to give a brief welcome and introduction to Profound Autism Alliance. And then we're very excited to turn this presentation over to our content expert, Kate Movius, and share some resources and then an opportunity for some Q&A. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send out a link to the recording as well as links to resources that we're referencing after the webinar today. I just want to start. My name is Kimberly Dick, and I'm the Executive Director for the Profound Autism Alliance. And just want to share a little bit about, the definition of, profound autism. And while we all know that, the definition of autism has really evolved over the years, it's really created a broad spectrum. And while everyone on the spectrum deserves the recognition and support, profound autism is really a term intended to provide clarification about autistic people who require 24/7 care from an adult caregiver throughout their lives, and also present with a severe intellectual disability or have minimal or no language. Our organization was founded in 2023 to add a unique perspective to the broader efforts related to autism research and advocacy. This unique perspective was initially inspired and informed by Jack City, a remarkable young man living with profound autism. Jack, like many of his peers living across the country, struggles to access meaningful care. Specifically in 2022, his severe self-injury caused ongoing deterioration of his health and loss of connection to his broader community. Clinicians from a variety of specialties worked to find solutions for Jack, but none had the research or expertise to do so. Jack had nowhere to turn. The Profound Autism Alliance was formed to change the situation for Jack and others like him. With the clarity provided through the work of the Lancet Commission, which provided that administrative definition of profound autism, and with research done by the Centers for Disease Control, which found that 1 in 4 autistic people have profound autism, our mission became clear. The Profound Autism Alliance is committed to the recognition of the unique challenges that people with profound autism and intellectual disability experience. Our mission is to improve their health and connection through inclusive research and focused advocacy that will result in meaningful services and supports. Now, I am very excited to introduce our speaker today. Kate Movius is the founder of Autism Interaction Solutions, whose mission is to provide effective training in autism identification, safety, and communication tactics for first responders. For over a decade, Kate has trained multiple police departments and other key county agencies. For the past 7 years, along with her autistic co-trainers, Kate has been the key disability trainer for the LA Sheriff's Department, the nation's largest. Kate's work has been profiled by CBS, ABC, Fox, and the LA Times. She is a frequent spokesperson about special needs issues and has been a contributing writer for the LA Times, Los Angeles Magazine, and Pasadena Magazine. Kate serves on the LA Found Task Force, working with the Los Angeles Board of Supervisors to establish a strategic plan to minimize the risks of wandering for people with Alzheimer's and autism. She is also a member of the Autism Society of America Safety Task Force. And Kate is also the proud mom of 2 sons, one whom has autism. Thank you again, Kate, for being here.
Thank you, Kimberly. Well, welcome everyone. Kimberly, why don't we take the next slide? Because this is really the reason why I'm sitting here with you. My son Aiden is now 23, and he had his first wandering incident at just around the age of 3. I think he had almost turned 3. And he had his last critical missing incident, which involved law enforcement. And you see the aftermath here. That was in 2014. And this looks like a happy scene. This was about a week after that incident. I want to tell you a little bit about that incident because there were things that I could have done to prepare better. And that's what we're going to talk about later. Aiden was, as I said, 14 years old. We had a house that I thought was very secured because he had had several elopements or wandering incidents throughout his life. But one night at about 2 a.m, he figured out our new lock system, which was, by the way, not a good way to have a lock system, which was putting the deadbolts inside the doors. He got a key, he figured out how to open it, and he was gone. By the time I figured out he was gone, it was about 5 a.m. He'd probably been gone about 3 hours. We live in an urban neighborhood in Los Angeles. It's very densely packed. There's a lot of traffic. There's a fair amount of crime. He was found at the corner of a major intersection. He was nude and very dirty. He was hospitalized as a John Doe. My phone call came in about 20 minutes after he was picked up by the gentleman that you see flanking him and his brother here. It was the worst night of my life, I will say. It did have a happy ending, but it very well could have not had a happy ending. Aiden had not been assaulted. Aiden had not been hit by a car. He had not injured himself, nor had he gone into a body of water and drowned. We don't know where he went. Aiden can't say his name and his address if asked, or at least it's not consistent. And for that reason, I had to go back and figure out what it was that we were not providing. That's what we're going to talk about here. Let's go to our next slide. So let's take a brief definition of wandering. I'm sure that most of the people in this webinar know very well what that is. But wandering is not just sort of happy wandering down the road and looking at the scenery. It's when an individual tries to leave the safety of a responsible person's care or a safe area, which can result in potential harm, including injury and death. And the thing that I always tell law enforcement when I'm training them is that wandering is a potentially fatal behavior. It's very important to remember that. It includes running off from lots of different situations. So it can really happen anywhere. It can happen at school. It can happen at the day program. If this is an adult, it can happen on vacation or in the community. The biggest risk of wandering by a mile is drowning. Next, we have traffic injuries, we have encounters with strangers, and then encounters with law enforcement where things can go sideways because the autistic individual is misunderstood or not following direction. Other dangers include anything that involves being exposed to the elements. There can be dehydration, there can be freezing to death, there can be heat stroke, physical restraint, should the child or adult have to be restrained by law enforcement, and then again, encounters with strangers that go awry. And the increased risks are associated with autism severity, because again, those with profound autism cannot say their name and their address. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at why people might wander. And I know for those of us with profoundly autistic loved ones, it's often a mystery. I can't ask Aiden why he enjoyed running off into the city with no clothes on. I can only guess. So some individuals might be goal-oriented. What that means is that they're looking for something. They might want to go to McDonald's, they might want to go to grandma's house, they might want to leave school and go home, but they have a goal in mind. The next is they might be fleeing an uncomfortable situation. They might be stressed out. There might be too much going on in the home. There might be loud noises, a social situation that they're not comfortable with. And so they want to escape that situation. The next is where I think my son falls. It's sensory seeking. It's the desire to feel the running, to feel the air, to feel the elements. And as we know, many of our loved ones are very sudden in their movements. It can be very unexpected. They can be sitting very nicely and calmly and safely, and all of a sudden they're out the door. They're seeking sensory input, and also bodies of water come into play here, and it can be, as I said earlier, extremely dangerous, where these individuals are seeking water, whether it's a visual input for them or it's sensory. Also, this is a big one. A change in routine will often lead to wandering incidents. The most incidents that occur every year in this country happen during the summer months. Now, there's a variety of reasons that could be. Doors might be open, but most likely it's because it's a change in routine and there's a loss of structure. So there's a loss of the daytime programming, whether it's school or day program. And there might again be visitors coming to the home where the caregivers could sort of be slightly distracted, or the child is seeking refuge from all of that change. But again, I just want to emphasize that summertime is the time when we see the most incidents. Next slide, please. So really important piece of this, and I wasn't really doing a good job of this with all the things I had to do raising somebody with profound autism. It's important to learn to recognize the possible triggers and then to document them. And we'll get into why that's so important in a few slides. Again, it's a mystery. We can't talk to our profoundly autistic loved ones, but we can start to observe and try to figure out what are the situations in which they tend to wander or bolt. So try to start to recognize those triggers. Are they upset? Are they thrilled with life and flying out the door? Are they going to a place? Do they have an objective in mind? And then you can work towards tailoring and controlling your environment and the child's environment accordingly. So record all of these incidents. And there's a really important reason for this. The first, obviously, is to try to mitigate the situation for your child and to try to fix the environment a little bit. Secondly, and this came into play for our family, if you document these incidents, this can go a long way towards obtaining possible 24/7 care for your loved one. That's what we were able to get after this terrifying incident involving the LAPD. Our developmental disabilities agency, which is in California, the regional center, then gave Aiden 5 nights a week of overnight care, and that was a game changer. But we had all that documented. You want to communicate this information to anybody that's involved with your loved one. So that would be any caregivers that come to the house, the school, the community, first responders, your neighbors, etc. We'll talk more about that in a bit. So let's go to the next slide. Let's take a look at the statistics because they're really sobering. So over half of children with autism will wander and bolt. Most of them will do it more than once. More than a third of children with autism are unable to communicate their name, address, or phone number reliably. Accidental drowning accounts for 91% of lethal outcomes, and that's followed by traffic injuries at 18%. So that's a really, really important statistic. Most of these drownings are preventable, probably all are preventable. Half of families with elopers, and I don't mean getting married, okay, I mean wandering, elopement. They've never received advice or any guidance. I certainly didn't when my son was diagnosed, and I think that every child who receives a diagnosis of autism in this country should go home with a wandering prevention kit for their parents. So that's just something to put on the docket maybe for Profound Autism Alliance. Next slide. So let's get into the 7 tips, the 7 main tips. First and foremost is swim lessons. Now that may seem out of reach or it may not seem applicable to your particular situation, but I put this first because again, this is the area in which children and those with autism see the highest rates of fatalities. And drowning can happen in as little as 17 seconds for a child, 17 seconds. Again, this accounts for 91% of lethal outcomes. You may feel very overwhelmed raising a child with profound autism. You may feel that swim lessons is not the number one thing you need to do on top of ABA and behavior and all of that. I'm here to tell you to, after this webinar, if you haven't yet done so, look into obtaining swim lessons for your profoundly autistic loved one, even if they're a great swimmer. These are available oftentimes at the Y nationwide. And one thing I want to point out too is that whoever handles or whatever agency in your state provides developmental disabilities services to your child. So this is apart from the school districts. In California, again, it's the regional center system. The way that you can obtain swim lessons is really twofold. And I know this isn't written down here, but one is to request swim lessons because your child is a danger to themselves. And that's no exaggeration. They're a danger to themselves because they could drown. And secondly, you want to request swim lessons because you want your child to access the community, which is the law, to be able to access the community and engage in recreational activities. So again, people are often told, no, we don't cover swim lessons. We're not going to fund that. These are two very solid reasons to justify swim lessons. Now, if you own a pool, don't get complacent. Even if you think you're never going to leave your child's side, you want to fence it as soon as possible. You want to remove anything that might draw your child to the pool, any sort of toys or pool noodles, anything like that. And remember that even if your child knows how to swim, it doesn't mean that they're safe in the water. We've seen some tragic incidents of children entering a body of water in the middle of winter. Again, the water just holds a kind of a universal interest and love for those children and adults with profound autism. You want to also put the word out to any neighbors who may have pools. And I know I told you you have to go out and get swim lessons after this webinar. The second thing that I would like you to do is at the end of this webinar, go to Google Earth and map your neighborhood and anything surrounding your house, meaning you can go up in the air on Google Earth and see where all of the bodies of water are. And you want to cover a pretty broad circumference so that you know exactly where those bodies of water are. Next slide. So how do we secure our homes? This is a very individual thing. Some of us can get state-of-the-art alarm systems. For others, that is completely out of reach, and that's okay. As long as there are some systems in place, and these can be cheaply obtained through Amazon, that may deter your child or at least cause your child to stop in their tracks a little bit. It's very important. First and foremost, and this again was something that I wish I had known, you want to install keyless locks, not deadbolts on the inside. That's a fire hazard. And it's also something that possibly your child could figure out. So I really like the analog mechanical keyless locks, and I think there's a link to that at the end of this, and if not, we'll get that to you. These are available on Amazon, and these do not require a battery. They are not electronic. These are mechanical locks that you will input a code, and you will have that code. This changed everything for our home. We had those installed not expensively at all on every door. There's a variety of other things you can decide upon. There's a home security alarm system, battery operated door alarms. We'll talk a little bit more about this and have some resources for you. Something as simple as a hook and eye lock that's out of reach. Anything that you can do to cause your child to pause and stop in their tracks. There are yard fencing materials that are available that are electronic, that have a little alarm that go off. And something as simple as having an adhesive stop sign. If your child is responsive to PECS or picture exchange communication systems, having those visual reminders that are at windows and doors can be very helpful. Next slide, please. We want to alert our community. Very important for those who have a profoundly autistic individual in the home. When the neighbors are on board or have knowledge of what's going on, it can be extremely helpful in crisis situations. I know this is not feasible for everybody out there. I know not everybody has supportive neighbors. I understand that. But there are certain things that you can do to reduce risks. At least let your neighbors know if you feel that they're safe and you want them to know this information about the risks of wandering for your loved one. You want to provide a letter, if you can, to trusted neighbors that profiles your child very briefly, talks about the places your child likes to go or possibly could run to. I will say that when we had a spate of incidents for our son Aiden, our neighbors were really, really key in helping assist in searching. They knew to look in certain places, and they all kind of fanned out. And it's helpful to have that support, and it also really adds to the likelihood of a safe return. Next slide. We want to alert our local first responders, very important. And the way to do this is not to call 911, but it's to call the non-emergency phone number on your local police department and talk to them. Talk to the person who answers. You may have to make a few calls and you may have to bug them for a little bit. Let them know that you have a person at risk who lives in the home. That person is nonverbal or minimally verbal and has a history of elopement or the potential for elopement or wandering. I want to point out here that for those of you whose child has never wandered, but you're concerned about it, you want to just prepare for that incident. You want to just assume that they will elope and wander and prepare. For most of us, we don't really do anything until the house is on fire, right? And for autism parents, you feel like you're putting fires out all day, every day. So it takes a crisis for you to take action. I'm here to implore you to not wait for the crisis, but to kind of lay in a bunch of preparation so that you can really help bring your child home safely. You want to give the local PD key information, and there's a chart here, there's a template. We'll have a link to that, I believe, at the end. You can also visit your local police station. I don't know if you have a profoundly autistic loved one who would be able to do that with you. It's okay if they can't. It's great if they can. Bring them to the local police station, explain the situation. Many police departments have a program that they coordinate with their dispatchers, their 911 dispatchers. It's often called a CAD or an address flagging program. And that's when you would call in and say, my child has a profound disability. They are at 123 Main Street, and I would like you to flag our address in your 911 system, in your dispatch system. And that's so that if there is a 911 incident, the responding officers have that information from dispatch, and that can be extremely helpful. You want to also have some informational handouts that are available for local police. You can hand those out, talk about your child, have a photograph, have the places again that your child might be found or might tend to wander to. Next slide. Tracking devices. This was another game changer for us. These really vary in terms of what works, what doesn't. And there are many to choose from, and it can feel overwhelming. We went with the Project Lifesaver wristband, which can also be used as an ankle band. I never thought my son would wear a wristband, but we worked with him on this after that critical missing incident, and he ended up wearing it. The Project Lifesaver program needs to be done in conjunction with your local police department. They need to obtain the equipment. And what happens is, should your child go missing, they are instantly trackable through the air, so through choppers as well as patrol cars. And there's a 100% safe retrieval rate nationwide for this particular program. Here in LA, we provide these wristbands for free through the LA Found program. That is not in every place, but that is something you could possibly request. There are lots of other tracking devices as well. There's traditional GPS, there's Find My iPhone, or the tags that you can provide on the child's backpack. There are wearable IDs and QR codes, and we'll talk about that towards the end. I do just want to say, again, I know how overwhelming it is to raise somebody with profound autism, and it can feel overwhelming to try a tracking device or two or three or four to see what works. But I would recommend that you do so because it can be not just a game changer, but a lifesaver. Next slide. You want to create a safety program for the day. So where does your child go during the day? Might be school. You might have an adult child that goes to a day program or a workshop of some kind, and that's got to be written down and documented. So we would obviously do that through an IEP plan. So this would be a wandering plan or a behavior wandering plan with the school. It would be a care plan for adults who are in a day program. And you want to provide, again, we all know about documenting everything, right? With IEPs, and got to get everything in writing. It's very important. You don't just want to say, well, he has a risk of wandering and I'm concerned. It's got to go into the plan. And very detailed steps for the plan. So you want to provide a letter requesting that they tell you of any wandering incidents that occur. I've heard so many times that parents find out weeks later that their child left school property. This has to be documented, that anytime there's an incident, it be reported home. Same for a day program. And share with them all the information we talked about gathering at the beginning, any trigger information, incident patterns, places that your child might go. That can be very helpful for them to create a robust wandering plan. Next slide. So this is something I wish that I had known. You want to create and post a 911 checklist. What that means is when you call 911, you clearly have written out for yourself the things that are pertinent. Anyone here who has called 911 on behalf of their child, and I'm here to tell you, the mind goes blank. You might even forget the color of your child's hair. You're in a heightened state of fight or flight. It's terrifying situation. And so if you post the pertinent information you're supposed to provide, even if you think there's no way I would forget what my child's wearing, there's no way I will forget my child's height and weight. Yes, you will, if you're in a state of crisis. First step, though, when your child goes missing, if your child should go missing, is to call 911. And I can't emphasize that strongly enough. Many people they wait for hours before they call 911. They think that they can find their child. This should be the absolute first step. A lot of parents say to me, I just don't want to call 911 because it turned out that he was just next door and that's using resources and I'm embarrassed and I don't want to make a fuss and I don't want to call the police. Call the police. Call 911. I understand that there are hesitations for people when concerning the police, but when it comes to those who go missing, statistics don't lie. And if 911 is called sooner rather than later, you have a far greater chance of a positive outcome. After calling 911, you want to state your name and address, and that's where the police should respond. You want to state that your loved one is missing, endangered, and you provide the diagnosis. Very important to provide the diagnosis, and that the child or adult is endangered. Provide that person's name, their height, their weight, their clothing description. Again, write this down for yourself. And in terms of clothing description, if you can, on top of all the things you have to manage every day, if you can remember to take pictures of your child, especially if they have a history of eloping, every day throughout the day. They may have several changes of clothes. You want to be able to have the most recent clothing description. And then you want to provide to the dispatcher any possible locations that your loved one might be. We will provide a link to a really helpful 911 checklist that the LAPD has created, and that'll be at the end of the presentation. Next slide. So let's talk about resources. There are many of them out there, fortunately, far more than used to be. The National Autism Association is a fantastic resource for wandering prevention. They have several free downloadable toolkits on everything from prevention to creating a safety social story for your child, swim lessons, etc. What you see there on the right is what's called their Big Ready Safety Box. And this is a free resource that they create every year. It runs out really fast, so just keep an eye on the website for this kit. I got one, I got my hands on one just after Aiden's big incident, and it was very helpful for me just organizationally because I was running on fumes and hadn't slept in several years. So it has a lot of little resources in it that including door alarms, stop signs, and so forth. And that was very helpful to have. Next slide. This is National Autism Association continued. They also have safety belt covers. They have window clings, and we're kind of getting outside of the purview of wandering here, but it's really, really helpful and important for any responding officers in any situation to understand immediately that they're dealing with somebody who has a disability. So let's say you're in the car, you get stopped, or God forbid you're in an accident, and your child is not responding to the first responders, and they don't know what's going on. Having this kind of a cue can be very, very helpful. So we've got our cars covered in the safety alert person with autism window clings. We've got a lot of those on our cars, and it just relaxes you a little bit to know that should something happen, that the responding officers or first responders would have a clue of what's going on. And you also see here a personal emergency profile. That's another resource that the National Autism Association provides. And again, I think it's a really helpful organizational tool for those of us who are feeling at our wits' end or need a little assistance in organizing all of this. Again, it talks about your child, place for a photograph, any emergency contacts, any medical needs, any signs of escalation that could occur. So let's say your child is found by themselves and there is no caregiver available, there's no ID tag. What are the possible things that could indicate escalation? And then what are the things that your child likes that could help calm them? What are the things that your child dislikes? Next slide. This is another great resource. It's called If I Need Help, and it was created by a family who have a son with profound autism. They provide a very wide range of items on their website, and they have a QR code-based tracking system, which they've been able to expand to tens of thousands of people. So I highly, highly recommend this resource as well. Next slide. We have the Autism Speaks Safety Kit. Another great resource is a really helpful one sheet, which is the Autism and Wandering Prevention Tips one sheet, which again helps us organize ourselves. And it kind of has a lot of the things that we've been talking about today on it. There's a family wandering emergency plan template, which again can assist you and your family should there be an incident. What are the things that we need to prioritize and that we need to do immediately? Next slide. So here we have some safety products. Again, there's a very wide range of types of products, you know, the state-of-the-art alarm system for the home to the cheap door alarm from Amazon. And I honestly can't tell you which one is better. I will say try lots of different things, see what works. I've got Project Lifesaver up there front and center just because that is something I've worked on here in LA County, and it does have a very high rate or the highest rate of retrieval, successful retrieval. There's a link here to Project Lifesaver. What you can do is go to their website and see if your local police department partners with Project Lifesaver. And if not, Project Lifesaver can help you reach out to your local police department. And then we have next, simple door alarm sensor from Amazon. We also have pager door alarms. And I will say that Alzheimer's and dementia websites have a lot of great wandering prevention resources. They have devices that can go on under the mattress that cue you if somebody gets up. So take a look at those as well, because those with dementia and Alzheimer's also are at very high risk for these types of incidents. Next slide. We've got some more resources here. The last one you see, which is LAPD online, is the 911 checklist. And Kimberly, I would imagine we can get these to people if they need them. I don't know if these are live links, but perhaps we can put some of these into the chat. There are search protocols, questionnaires for first responders. Again, the ways that we as parents can help organize ourselves to prepare for these kinds of incidents. All the things that I had not done, frankly, because I was simply living in the moment of each crisis as it came. And so creating all of this preparatory material for you can be really helpful and just help you to relax a little bit more as well. Next slide. Call to action for Profound Autism Alliance. I suppose I can speak on behalf of Profound Autism Alliance. We want to share our stories as those of us who are living with or loving those with profound autism. As we know, it's not in the forefront in the news. It's not out there as much as other types of autism. And it's really, really important that we share exactly what it is that we need, that our loved ones need, because as we're talking about here today, it's really a matter of life and death sometimes. And we need to publicize that fact. And Kimberly, did you want to add?
I just want to thank you, Kate, for this incredible knowledge. I was even putting down some notes myself as you were speaking. And yes, we are going to send out a email after the presentation that'll include a recording to the presentation, all of the live links to the resources, some of the products that we referenced. And again, please visit, if this is a shortened URL to Profound Autism, or visit our website, profoundautism.org, and, sign up for our newsletter. We are hoping to do more Caregivers Connected presentations on various topics specific for the profound autism community. And again, as Kate mentioned, share your story. Please, one of our organization goals is to, really have effective targeted advocacy for inclusion, for our loved ones with profound autism. And so sharing your story with legislators is incredibly important so that they have an understanding of what our parents and caregivers, experience every day. With that, let's see if we have any questions in the chat. It does not look like we have any questions. Oh, we do have one. Oh, we have one feedback. Somebody uses a medic alert as a low-tech fail-safe. That's a great idea as well. Oh, thank you everyone for all the positive comments. This is amazing. We appreciate it. Kate, thank you for your incredible expertise. And if we don't have any other questions, we will close out for today and look for a follow-up email with all of these links.
We have a question. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Really, we had a question regarding swim lessons covered by insurance. So the question is, you were saying that we could get swim lessons covered by insurance, and I realized that must have been confusing. So what I was talking about was having swim lessons covered by, in Massachusetts, for example, I'm trying to think of what the alternative to the regional center system would be that we have in California. So I would imagine that there are state-run developmental disability resources in each state, and somebody else can chime in if they wish, because that's what I was talking about.
I'll just chime in and say that wandering and elopement, is a diagnosis code. So I have heard of, some families receiving, some things covered through insurance. I think it really, and Judith may be able to speak more to this. I think it just really depends upon your plan and what they offer. But I have heard of that.
Great. And I wish I were more familiar with the developmental disability resources state by state. I know California is unique, but here we have the regional center system, and we our loved ones are provided services for the lifespan, apart from the school district services, and that would be where we would appeal. One of my two sons with profound autism is also a Project Lifesaver wearer. He has demonstrated that the strap is not entirely unbreakable, but we are very happy to have it. Yes, I can absolutely relate to that. I think it's important to remember that no tracking system is perfect. In fact, they're all imperfect, I will say. And they don't work all the time. They don't work for all of our loved ones. And that's why we need to try a bunch of them, and then also, if one of them doesn't work, is to go back to it. I can say that Project Lifesaver would not have worked for my son probably when he was younger, but by the time he was 14 and we were able to do some behavior therapy with him around the wristband, that worked for him. And any other feedback people have about wearable tracking, please share.
I'm not sure if anyone else has any feedback, questions. We have some time. Well, thank you again, everyone, for being here this afternoon. We are so grateful. And Kate, we appreciate your expertise. And everyone, please have a great day, and we'll see you for our next Caregivers Connected.